All right, welcome to Business 211, Supervision, Chapter 12, Health and Safety. Good to be back with you again. If you're watching these chapters one right after the other, which you're probably not, but if you are, it's been about 3 minutes since I finished Chapter 11. And when I was in Chapter 11, I told you we had one more chapter, Chapter 12, that we'll have to do. And then we'll be testing online Chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay. Chapter 12 is concerning health and safety. Is that, I guess you call it a rhetorical question when you ask something you know the answer to. But is health and safety a big deal in business? Well, sure. If your employees are your greatest asset, you want them there working and working well, of course. And employees, people, do they want to be safe and healthy? The answer is yes. It benefits them, it benefits the company. Accidents on the job and things like that can literally cost tons and tons of money. So you want to be safe and healthy as far as in the workplace. Now, the federal government has a role in health and safety in the workplace. And so if we look at our Chapter 12 handout, I say this: the federal government's attempt to assure a safe and healthy working environment for the broadest possible base of employees was done through the Occupational Safety and Health Act. So the Occupational Safety and Health Act, passed by the federal government, was for the purpose of trying to ensure safety and health in the workplace for the broadest number of employees possible. The Occupational Safety and Health Act established the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We know it as OSHA. And OSHA is the one that oversees, makes inspections, does audits. They are the agency within the federal government with charge with seeing that the requirements of the Occupational Safety and Health Act are carried out. And the Occupational Safety and Health Act says this: workplace health and safety is a responsibility of management. Management has, it's smart. Why wouldn't you want to have a safe and healthy working environment? Okay. So what we're trying to do as we begin this is make sure that we realize, I know we do, that health and safety is really, really important. And the federal government's contribution to that is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. And the agency, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is the one that enforces those provisions. If you're looking, I'd be familiar with what the Occupational Safety and Health Act, I'd be familiar with it, I'd be familiar with what it does. Okay. You'll see another thing on the handout that I put. Under OSHA, both employers and employees have clearly defined rights. Now, if you have a book for Chapter 12, started off Chapter 12, health and safety, just the things that we've said. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration is the one. Then it says employer and employee rights under OSHA. Under Occupational Safety and Health Administration, both employees and employers have rights. And so I'll just show you, and if you have your book, you already know this. There are 10 rights that employers have, and there are, on the next page, 25 rights that employees have. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, is that going to be a no or a be familiar with? I'll never know or be familiar with all those things. Well, that's okay. Relax. Not going to have to know or be familiar with it. I just want you to know, I just want you to be familiar with that under OSHA, there's a number of rights that employers have, and there's a number of rights that employees have, because OSHA is trying to protect the health and safety of people on the job. And so in doing that, both employees and employers have rights. Okay, sometimes are things done in a company that are not safe. OSHA comes and inspects. If they're called upon to come to a place because of a situation, they come in. Otherwise, they'll just come in and do unannounced type inspections. Now, a lot of you probably are, some of you may have worked under OSHA. You may be working under OSHA right now. You may know more about OSHA than I know. Okay. All right. So, there are 4 different types of OSHA violations. So let's look at those. And I'm gonna use that. I've laid them out on my handout, but I'm gonna also use, I think I'll use my text as well. OSHA violations. I'm gonna go from the least serious up to the most serious. A de minimis violation. A citation issued with an OSHA standard is violated, but there is no danger of injury, death, or illness. There's a lot of I've seen OSHA books where a company has their health and safety OSHA manual. Those things sometimes are that thick. Well, if you've violated one of those things in that book, but it wasn't any chance of an injury or you said a death or an illness, but you violated something, that would be a de minimis. That's the least. The idea would be just clean that up. A non-serious violation, that's the second one, is issued when a hazard exists that the employer legitimately did not know about. Okay, some companies are big companies. There's a lot of OSHA regulations. There may be something there that could have been a cause for an accident, but management simply didn't know it. They really didn't know it. In that case, OSHA would write up a non-serious violation. The third one, a serious violation, is issued when a condition exists that might result in death or serious injury. This is serious stuff. And the employer knew or should have known of the condition. Now, some things are important enough that could cause death or serious injury, and management didn't know about it, but OSHA should say, but you should have. This situation, you should have known about it. If you didn't know about this situation, there's some things you're not doing as it relates to your health and safety, inspections or organization or following your policies and procedures. That would be serious violation. An imminent danger violation. Whoa. And by the way, I do want you to again be familiar with these. An imminent danger violation is issued when an OSHA inspection reveals a condition that is so unsafe or so unhealthy that serious injury or death might result, and the employer does not correct it immediately. Imminent danger violations can result in court action to shut a company down. Imminent danger is just that. You wonder sometimes, how would a company get something get to the point where it would be an imminent danger violation? But the company, and I've known a few situations where, I usually give this example. I don't know if it was Arcadia or it was somewhere in central Louisiana. It's been a number of years ago. OSHA shut down a chicken processing plant. Have no idea what company, anything like that. It's way too long ago. Now, let's stop and think for a minute. What happens in a chicken processing plant? Chickens get processed. Kind of get the picture? That's, okay. So that in itself is pretty interesting. So I get to thinking, what are they doing in a chicken processing plant that could be so serious that they would shut that plant down? And then I get to thinking about what those things could be, and it makes me say, do I ever want to eat a chicken again? So you kind of get the idea. So okay, I would be familiar with the different types of violations under OSHA. Then he talks about the supervisor's role as it relates to health and safety in the workplace. Because remember, all of these things we're doing in relation to the supervisor's role. When we were talking about chapter 10, Drugs in the workplace. What's the supervisor's role? Don't say anybody is using drugs. We'll look at their work performance. If you think their work performance is maybe drugs could be a problem, you report it to HR. Sexual harassment, we talked about the supervisor's role there. The number one supervisor's role in sexual harassment is to set the example. Set the example. We talked about in training. Supervisors are always engaged in training. And now in Chapter 12, Health and Safety, the supervisor, that big thick book, what is the supervisor's role? And here's what our author said. The supervisor's role with regard to health and safety in the workplace should be defined by management policy. That policy manual should spell out that supervisor's responsibility. Now, I can tell you one of those things within that manual is going to be to set the example for safety. But I want you to be familiar with the fact that as it relates to the supervisor's role, that role should be defined by management policy. Okay. He talks about assigning responsibility for health and safety on my handout. Health and safety in the workplace are the responsibility of management and employees. I'd be familiar with that. First, management has to provide safe working conditions. Employees have to work in a safe manner. To go in a particular area, you may need particular equipment. Management has policy and procedure. You do not move into this area without this special equipment. And this special equipment is provided for you. That's management's responsibility as it relates to health and safety. What is your responsibility? To know that requirement and to wear that equipment. There's a business down in Jonesboro, Rock 10 Rock. I never can remember exactly. They've changed the name a lot, several different times. But it's a big operation down there. The law firm that my daughter is involved with, they do a good bit of legal work with that company. And Laura is usually the one that goes down to the company in case something comes up where there's something that needs to be involved. She has her boots and she has her hat that they issued to her. And so when she comes, if she goes into the main building, that's fine. But if she goes anywhere else, she used to wear those boots and she used to wear that helmet. And maybe the goggles too. I'm not sure, but I know she's got the hat and the boots. Because they're wanting to make sure that not only their employees, but visitors are safe as well. So, assigning responsibility for health and safety, management has to have a safe working environment. Employers have to work safely. Okay. This is kind of good. I think I'll just work off of this a minute and make sure I'm good. I'm good with this. New employees, and I think I did say I want you to be familiar with the fact that management and employees both have a role as it relates to health and safety in the workplace. All right, let's talk about training. We did that in Chapter 11. Yeah, but Chapter 12, let me talk about training specifically as it relates to health and safety. A new employee, they go through orientation. As a part of orientation, or as part of the very first training, maybe when they go to their work assignment, should they be trained on things as it relates to health and safety? The answer is yes. It is absolutely imperative that health and safety training, whatever they need to know about, that's done when that new employee comes aboard. Okay. Also, here's how our author says it. Sometimes everybody becomes new. Here's what he says. It is important to train new employees so they learn to work safely from the outset. When beginning a new safety program in an established organization, what should you do there? Train everybody. If you've got a new safety program that you're going to implement, make sure everybody that is not trained previously treat all employees as new employees. It's really, really important that you do that. Okay. Whew. The last page on my study notes for chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. Are you ever going to have an accident? Accidents are going to still occur. I think we talked about with me. I had an accident involving a ladder. Now, my wife tells it one way, and I tell it a second way, but I'm telling it the right way. I had put the ladder up, and the ladder, the foundation, the bottom part of the ladder, about 2/3 of the ladder was on concrete, and the other third was on pine straw on top of dirt, I thought. And so I've got it there, and I'm climbing up the ladder. Well, as I climb up the ladder, there's one thing I need to kind of to go over to the very left side of that step. When it did, that ladder went this way, because underneath that pine straw was not dirt, it was a hole. And so that ladder simply, as I shifted my weight more to the left side, that ladder, there was nothing down there to keep. So the ladder went this way, and I went that way, and like to kill myself. Okay. So my wife likes to tell it, Joe fell off a ladder. I did not fall off the ladder. The ladder went one way, and I went the other way. Okay. Now, could I have prevented that? Yeah, I could have. I needed to be a lot safer to make sure that I had the whole foundation, bottom of the ladder, on solid ground or on solid concrete. So I've become much more careful as I go up on ladders. Actually, that happened about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and I hadn't been on a ladder since. But if I ever get on another ladder, I'll make really, really sure that I'm careful about that. Accidents do occur, even though you do think you're being safe. So our author says, in spite of the best efforts, an accident may still occur. Should you have an accident investigation within your company? Yes. Yes. Every accident should be investigated. Even if it didn't cause serious damage, maybe it will the next time. So you have to have after the investigation, you should do an accident report. Now, let me get back to my text here for just a moment to make sure I have everything here that I want for you. An accident report, I think I put this on our handout. An accident report, I want you to be familiar with the fact that in spite of best efforts, accidents can still occur. And I want you to be familiar with what an accident report is. A comprehensive summary of all the pertinent facts about an accident. Now, I said I want you to be familiar with, not really know, but be familiar with the rules as it relates to writing an accident report. I did not put them on your handout, but just or your study guide, but so I'll go ahead and use the book and talk about what they are. Here's some things that should be included or excluded, I could say, in an accident report. Number one, be brief and stick to the facts. You're not writing a novel, you're writing an accident report. But don't be too brief. Make sure all the facts come out. Number two, be objective and impartial. You need to be objective. Here's what happened, here's what did not happen. And you need to be impartial. It's not a matter of, well, this. Tell it like it is. Be objective and impartial. Number three, be comprehensive. Leave out no facts. You want to be as brief as you can, but you got to be comprehensive. That doesn't mean that you can do it in one paragraph. Be comprehensive, leave out no facts. State clearly what employees and what equipment were involved. Who was involved in the accident? What equipment were they using? And number five, list any procedures, processes, or precautions that were not being observed at the time of the accident. What, in your opinion, caused the accident? What were some things that could have led to the accident? List any procedures, processes, or precautions that are not being observed. Next, list causal factors and any contributing factors. the weather, something else that happened that could have caused this to happen. List causal factors and any contributing factors. And lastly, make brief, clear, concise recommendations for corrective measures. I'd be familiar with those. Those are the things that should be in an accident report. Brief, stick to the facts, objective and impartial, comprehensive, don't leave out facts, state clearly what employees and what equipment were involved, list any procedures, processes, or precautions that were not being observed, list any causal factors or any contributing factors, make brief, clear, concise recommendations for corrective action. Okay. There's something else, and I'm not sure exactly where it is in this chapter, but we talked about this a little bit. Who should do the accident report? I don't think the supervisor should do the accident report, because it may be something in his department. It's going to be hard for him to be impartial if the report's going to make him look poorly. I think a company should have somebody assigned, probably your safety and security officer should be trained in how to do an accident report and how to do the accident report properly and follow those steps that we're talking about. So he mentions a little bit in here about workers' compensation after he talks about this. Do you know what workers' comp is? I know you do. Workers' compensation is state legislation that protects an employee when they are injured on the job. They have an on-the-job injury. What it does is it gives employees certain rights and certain things if they are injured on the job. Giving injured workers recourse without need for lengthy, expensive court action. So what happens is, if you are injured on the job in Louisiana, you can file for workers' compensation. I'd be familiar with, at least be familiar with what workers' compensation is. What can you get? I mean, what is provided to you through workers' compensation? Well, they're going to pay for your medical bills. They're going to pay for you through your workers' compensation. They're going to pay for the drugs. They're going to pay for any rehabilitation. And there's also going to be some type of income replacement. Just be familiar with the fact that as a part of workers' comp, you're going to get some portion of your income while you're off and not able to return to work. Okay. And by the way, workers' compensation laws are pretty good in Louisiana. I mean, they're pretty broad. They cover a lot of things. And I think that's probably because of the offshore industry that we've had. The oil industry has brought about some really good workers' compensation laws. All right. I think the last thing that he talks about in here is bloodborne pathogens and employee health and safety. All right. So what are we talking about? AIDS, hepatitis C, hepatitis B have become significant health and safety issues for supervisors. It is critical that supervisors know how to deal properly and appropriately with these controversial diseases. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bloodborne pathogens, these type of infectious diseases. These things are covered under federal law. And the law that they're covered under is the Rehabilitation Act. Now let me help us a little bit. The legal considerations relating to bloodborne pathogens in the workplace grow out of several pieces of federal legislation. The Rehabilitation Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, and Employee Retirement Income Security Act. The major one is the Rehabilitation Act. The Rehabilitation Act was enacted to protect handicapped people, including handicapped workers. I didn't do that very well. Let's do this again. The Rehabilitation Act was enacted to protect handicapped people, including handicapped workers. Section 504 of the Act makes discrimination on the basis of handicap unlawful. Okay, let's look at the notes. I want you to be familiar with the Rehabilitation Act. On your notes here, I've said Section 504 of the Act makes discrimination on the basis of handicap unlawful. You can't discriminate against a person because they have a handicap. Bloodborne pathogens are considered as handicapping things. Okay, there are 3 words or 3 terms here that I want us to be familiar with. You cannot discriminate against a person that is handicapped if they are otherwise qualified to do the job. What does it mean? Let me use a dumb example, but I may use it for a couple of things. You're hiring a job as a senior accountant for your company. You have an accounting office, and it's upstairs on the 2nd floor back in an old building. It's nice, it's fixed up nicely, but it's back in an old building that is not used really for anything except accounting. The only way you can get to that 2nd story is with stairs. Somebody applies for this accounting job and they're in a wheelchair. And you decide, I really don't want to hire them because they're in a wheelchair and it's hard for them to get them up to the 2nd floor. Is that going to work? No, but they're the best qualified. All right, so you're going to have to make that. All right, so individuals, all right, you cannot discriminate against someone because they have a handicap. Handicap, if they are otherwise qualified. How do you determine if they're otherwise qualified? They are otherwise qualified if they can perform the essential functions of the job. Job, there we go. And you must give them reasonable accommodations. All right. Section 504 of the Act, the Rehabilitation Act, makes discrimination on the basis of handicap unlawful. You cannot discriminate against those people that have handicaps, including bloodborne pathogens, if they're otherwise qualified. How do you determine if they're otherwise qualified? They're otherwise qualified if they can perform the essential functions of the job. So my person that was going for that senior accountant position, they had a handicap by they were wheelchair bound. Could they ever, could they perform the essential functions of the job? Yes. And then the third thing here is you have to give people reasonable accommodation. A person has a handicapping situation. Now I can't think of how this would work, but let me just give you a really dumb example. A person has a handicapping situation of some kind where they need more space than the normal employee. That person applies for the job that has that situation. I know it's dumb, but let's just go with it. And they are otherwise qualified because they can certainly perform the essential functions. But they're going to need, for whatever reason, a little additional space to be able to do that job. Is that probably a reasonable accommodation? Well, sure. If that person that is in that wheelchair, if they're the very best person for that accounting job, to have a way for them to get to the 2nd floor where the accounting is done, would that be considered reasonable accommodation? Well, of course. I mean, we know right now, as far as folks with, that should have, we know about all the importance of wheelchair accessibility. Okay. Now, let's say you've got a guy that applies for a job, And that person, whatever job they apply for, they're brilliant. But this person has no immune system. This person has to stay in basically a sterile environment with humidity controlled, with temperature controlled, with all those sort of things. And that's the only way they can work. So they apply for your job and you don't hire them because of that. Are you probably going to be okay with that? The answer is yes. Because are they otherwise qualified? Yes. Can they perform the essential functions? Yes. But is making a totally different place, setting off a place that's totally sterile, totally controlled, is that reasonable accommodation? Probably not. That goes beyond reasonable accommodation. A couple of things our author says here. And I want you to be familiar with otherwise qualified, that Rehabilitation Act, otherwise qualified, essential functions and reasonable accommodation. Section 504 makes discrimination on the basis of handicap. I know you hate to be read to, but let me do it just a little bit. I don't know if you can see my face, probably you can see my book. Any agency, organization, or company that receives federal funding falls within the purview of the Act. Such entities may not discriminate against handicapped individuals who are otherwise qualified. Through various courts' actions, this concept has been well defined. A handicapped person is otherwise qualified when he or she can perform what the courts have described as the essential functions of the job. When a worker's handicap is a contagious disease such as AIDS or hepatitis, it must be shown that there is no significant risk of the disease being transmitted in the workplace. If there is a significant risk, the infected employee is not considered otherwise qualified. There is one final concept associated with the Rehabilitation Act with which the supervisor should be familiar: the concept of reasonable accommodation. In determining if a handicapped person can perform the essential functions of the job, employers are required to make reasonable accommodation to help the employees. This concept applies to workers with any type of handicapping condition, including a communicable disease. What constitutes reasonable accommodation, like what constitutes otherwise qualified, must be determined on a case-by-case basis. The supervisor's knowledge of the various jobs in his or her unit will be essential in helping make an otherwise qualified decision. Okay, sorry about all that reading, but I wanted you to get a feel for that. Let's say that you are going to hire a salad chef. What that salad chef does is they prepare salads all day long. And in preparing those salads, they are using sharp instruments continuously. A person has AIDS, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. They are otherwise qualified if they can perform the essential functions. However, what's the risk factor here? The risk factor probably is pretty high. If there is a significant risk, the infected employee is not considered otherwise qualified. So if you did not hire that person to be a salad chef, you probably, even challenged, you'd probably be okay with that. But if that person was going to do some other job within your restaurant, if they were otherwise qualified and perform the essential functions of that job, if you decided, well, I just don't want to hire them because they've got hepatitis B, probably not. That's why it says it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. Okay, there's one last thing in chapter 12 that I want you to be familiar with. And let me make sure that I haven't lost you. I want you to be familiar with with an accident report. I want you to be familiar with what it is. I want you to be familiar with those rules that you should follow in doing an accident report. I want you to be familiar with what workers' compensation is. And I think the one thing I want you to be familiar with there, not only is what workers' compensation is, but as a part of workers' compensation, you can get income replacement. I want you to be familiar with the Rehabilitation Act, what it does, makes discrimination on the basis of handicapped unlawful. I want you to be familiar with the terms otherwise qualified, essential functions, and reasonable accommodation. Now, one last thing in this chapter. There is a federal act, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. You've probably heard of it as ERISA. I want you to be familiar with what ERISA does because it relates to these things we've just been talking about. The Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, protects the benefits of employees by prohibiting actions taken against them based on their eligibility for benefits. This means that employers covered by ERISA cannot terminate an employee with a bloodborne disease or one who is suspected of having such a disease as a way of avoiding expensive medical costs. Under ERISA, it is irrelevant whether the employee's condition is considered a handicap since the Act applies to all employees. The Employee Retirement Income Safety, it protects the benefits of employees. Just because, hey, an employee's got hepatitis B, that's going to be a lot of expense on our medical coverage here. Let's get rid of that person. You can't do that under ERISA. And you shouldn't do that under ERISA. Okay? Right. So that pretty much takes care of Chapter 12. That's chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. That's the 4 chapters that we're going to be doing leading up to test number 3. I think we've done a pretty good job with the 4 chapters. I think we know the no items. I think we know the be familiar with items. So I think we are ready to do those. Now what we'll do, you can check your contract document as to when the test number 3 is going to be administered. And we'll do it online. You'll have it. You'll have a particular length of time. The test will be open from this time to this time, and then you'll have a particular length of time to take the test once you start the test. Again, I want to reiterate as we kind of finish up these 4. Be sure to get in touch with me if you need to. There's just a few of us in this particular class. Email me, call me, text me if there's anything that you need to know or anything like that. Anything I can help you with. All right, now here before long, we are going to be videoing chapters. I think 13, 14, and 15, which are the last 3 chapters, which will be on test 4, which is the final, and then the final will be comprehensive to some things all the way back to the beginning. But we'll review real well for that before we do it. So we are now finished with the things we need to do for test number 3. I need to make that loud noise so that we know that this is the end of this particular session, and we are finished. See you at test 3.